Welcome to the studios of News Karnataka, where today, very interestingly, just as we have ended the G20 summit under India's presidency, which India took over in December last year and which will end in November of this year or the end of October, uh, we have a very interesting citizen who would like to share his views about this particular summit and its achievements. Now, he's Mr. Ramana Kumar. He has a rich experience of over 30 years in the financial and capital markets of India and abroad, and his knowledge of the subject of the economy is very vast. But as we all know, money is the root of all politics. I don't say it's of evil, but of all politics. So every political maneuver by any nation always has something to do with money. And the G20, or the group of 20 nations, which is now 21, inclusive of the African Union, which was taken on board at the current Delhi summit, actually focuses a lot on improving the global economy because these 19 countries plus the European Union are very, they represent the largest economies of the country. So in that sense, they actually have a lot to do with the economy of the country. Now, given this background, what has the Delhi G20 summit really achieved? Now, we all know that during these summits, a lot of pre-preparation goes in. There's a declaration at the end of the summit. And the declaration generally gives us an idea of what was discussed and what the future map is going to look like. Of course, the next president will be Brazil. It goes by rotation country-wise. The next presidency of the G20 will be Brazil. But in the 1 year that India has held the presidency, a lot of consultations with a lot of the member countries and the Union, the European Union, and now the African Union, have taken place. And in that background, the Delhi Declaration has what shall we say, achieved a lot for many reasons. It is something that even Shashi Tharoor, who is in the opposition, has praised. A lot of the achievements revolve around the economy. Of course, there were differences in the politics of it. Of course, the Ukraine-Russia war also was one of the differences that could be seen. But by and large, it was a unanimous Delhi declaration. It was a unanimous Delhi declaration in which 83 paras of the declaration were passed unanimously with 100% consensus out of the 112. It actually contained 112 outcomes, and both the outcomes and the annexed documents is 2.5 times more than any other. Now, with so many countries pursuing their own interests, to achieve so much of consensus is something fantastic. There were two other achievements which were very important, which I will discuss with Mr. Ramana Kumar. One is the launch of the Global Biofuels Alliance between US, Brazil, and India. This was announced by PM Modi at a press conference. And of course, the mega India, Middle East, Europe shipping and railway connectivity corridor, which is something really, really great. And this will probably shut out China from the rest of the world. Is probably what they wanted to achieve politically, but economically, it is going to help India and the rest of the world. Now, with this background, let me just dive deep into the G20 summit and its achievements. What is your overview of the whole G20 summit as we had it in Delhi, and it just concluded on the 10th of September? Can you tell us your overview, Mr. Ramana Kumar?
Yeah, thank you for hosting me, Brian. Very nice to be here with you, and doubly interesting because we are talking on a topic which is it is so much of interest to the entire country, and which has received a kind of a carpet coverage of all media across the world. Right. So when we talk about the G20, as you rightly said, its economics and politics are very closely interrelated. And the source of G20 is, correctly speaking, the economic sphere. So if you just go back a little bit into history and see why and when this started. So there used to be this G7, which used to be considered the all-powerful body, right? Outside the UN. UN is a separate thing. Outside the UN, G7 used to be considered very powerful. But when the global financial crisis struck the world in 2008, it was felt that just the G7 is not enough to arrive at a consensus to have a collaborative effort to tackle the crisis. That is when the G20 came into being. Right. So the G20 involved not just the richest Western countries, but also other major economies around the world. So it was very successful in having a joint coordinated effort around the world to bring the global economy out of crisis. So in the current G20 also is trying to pursue the same economic agenda rather than get diverted into geopolitics and security issues. Right. So most of the Western countries were putting a lot of pressure on G20 members as well as the G20 president, that is India, that you should strongly, take a strong line against Russia because of the Russia-Ukraine war. Right. So that is why, as you rightly mentioned, it is a fantastic achievement to come out with this consensus document, the declaration of 83 paragraphs, right? Because there was a very deep concern and there was a expectation that nothing may come out of it. But in spite of those kind of pressures, India, under its presidency, and of course, with the cooperation of other major emerging market economies and the support of the West, including US, has been able to come out with a joint statement, and which is a massive achievement in itself in these times of very disturbed, politics and global economics. So that is one. The second one, what you mentioned, is about the entry of the African Union. That is also a major geopolitical issue, economic issue, and also a fairly emotive issue. If you look at it from the African point of view, see, when we talk about United Nations and particularly about let's say a Security Council has at least one Asian member in the form of China. Right. So in Africa and Latin America, as our External Affairs Minister Jaishankar was also saying, they find no representation. Right. So having Africa at a very important forum such as the G20, the Africans are extremely happy about it. And this is something which has come up earlier. And our Prime Minister had assured the African Union that they will get that membership. So this is the second big achievement of the current round of G20. And as you rightly said, it is a rotational presidency. Other countries will take over, and they may have their own value addition, their own achievements. But in this one, this is the second achievement. And the third was about, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. So the IMEE, as it is called. So why is it important? It's important because it offers a different kind of route for India to connect with Europe, right? And as our people have been saying, whether it's external affairs minister or the Indian Prime Minister, their intent has been to have to promote that connectivity, right? That connectivity, whether it is digital connectivity, economic connectivity, across different regions and across different partners around the world to promote a global well-being. Right. So the slogan of this time, this G20 was Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and that is why they also say it is one world, one family, right, and one future.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
in that spirit, India has been trying to connect with like-minded nations around the world. One point, maybe, if you look at, you mentioned that this may shut out China. So it may not be such an ambitious enterprise, because if you see the BRI, which was started by the Belt and Road Initiative of China, right? Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, when he started it, that was I think around 2010 or so when they started. They have implemented so many projects. They have poured almost $1 trillion worth of development, infrastructure projects around the world. Unfortunately, a good lot of them are not viable, and they've created a burden for developing countries, and it has become a kind of a curse for their economies. So that is why an alternative model for development, for aid, for infrastructure building in developing markets is necessary, and that is why this vision offers an alternative. But it is not just to compete with China, it also will have important benefits for India. So, for example, goods right now, how are they going to Europe from India? By sea, if you leave Mumbai, these ships are going through Arabian Sea, then the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, and then it goes to Europe, right? That is the route that is being followed right now. So, what is the benefit of this new corridor? It is estimated that the sea route that is being followed now will take 17 days for goods to reach Europe from India. The new corridor may bring that down to about 10 days, right? So that is an important economic benefit. So it is not just competition with China, it is an important economic benefit. And this is something as an outcome of what India has been building better relations with West Asia for quite some time now. For the last 8 to 9 years under the present government dispensation, we have built very good relationships with UAE and Saudi Arabia particularly, and Israel also has been a strong partner now. So this entire region, by bringing people together and promoting this connectivity, it will have economic benefits across this entire region, including into Europe. So that is my take on it.
Correct. Now, I just did a little bit of research and I found that the G20 is composed of the world's largest economies. And it accounts for 80% of the gross world product, 75% of the international trade, and 2/3 of the global population, and 60% of the world's land area. Now, these are astounding statistics. When you have 60% of the land area and 80% of the trade, there are a lot of discrepancies, or shall we say, variations in the actual economies of the participating nations.
Yes.
There are, of course, very strong economies. There are developing economies and very poor countries now that the African Union has joined the G20. I just want your take on how actually the developed world looks at these developing countries, and how the developing countries actually look at the developed world when they are all sitting together across the table. See, there are two things. The developing economies want to do a lot more for themselves. The developed economies also want to do a lot more for themselves, but not at their own cost. There are paradoxes involved, and if you understand what I'm saying, I'm talking even about climate change. Of course, they have signed the Climate Change Development Pact. The second one, they said they will endorse it. But the thing is, these paradoxes, how do you feel that they can reconcile them?
No, absolutely. That's a great point, Brian. And just one thing about the percentage of economy and land area and all that. Probably that will go up after adding the African Union, because 60% of land mass, I think it is before Africa is added. After that, it will go up even higher. So if you look at the kind of interaction that we have been having between the developed world and the developing countries, right? The biggest pain point, right, has been the climate change, right? In recent times, particularly after COVID, many of these economies are suffering, particularly as an outcome of the Russia-Ukraine war, right? As we all know that the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war has been that fuel prices have gone up, fertilizer prices have gone up, food prices have gone up, right? And all these three are vital necessities for the less developed countries, right? See, Europe and America are rich enough to overcome this, and they can tackle it much more easily. But it is for the lesser, income countries or developing countries who are really struggling, right? On top of that, we have seen the havoc being caused by climate change, right? Climate change, it is only lip service that the developed world has been giving so far. They talk about climate change, but they don't do anything about it. For example, under Trump, when he was a president, they walked out of the COP26, commitments. That they refused to ratify the treaty at all. And if you look at the kind of consumption of energy that the developed West is having, right? they are, some of the highest consumers of energy, and they are some of the highest emitters of carbon. And historically, it is the Western industrialized world which has pumped so much of carbon into the atmosphere, which is leading to climate change and overheating, right? But they refuse to acknowledge that, right? Because once they acknowledge that, then people will start talking about reparations and damages and funding the repair work and so on. They refuse to acknowledge it. So that is a problem. So that is where India is trying to bring about some kind of collaborative effort. See, for example, even if US didn't sign the COP26, right? Broadly, the Western world had committed $100 billion per annum to be funded for the developing countries for the transition, right, from the existing energy sources to the clean energy sources. They have not given anything. $100 billion is a very far cry. They are given hardly anything, right? So that is where this biofuels alliance or international solar alliance or a target to reduce from 2019 by 2030 about 43% of carbon output. These are the kind of via media that India is trying to bring people together and try to go towards tackling climate change in some practical time bound manner, right? So I mean, if you keep talking about 100 billion, nobody is going to listen to you. So you have to try in some practical via media. Okay, why don't we look at step 1, step 2, step 3? So that has been the collaborative effort that India is trying to bring about across very different kinds of economies. As you rightly said, that the developed world, if you look at US, yeah, sorry, you have a question.
Yeah, when you look at the African Union, now they are the latest entrants to the G20. Everybody has an interest in the African Union, from China to the US. And one of the reasons is, of course, its fuel sources. It's also its minerals. There's gold. There are the precious other ones which are used for the batteries, lithium, and so on and so on. And a lot of the countries are interested in their getting the best out of the Africans for themselves. What is it? What is in it for the African Union itself? That's what I was trying to figure out, and maybe you can throw some light on that.
So African Union will be looking at getting a better deal for its resources. See, for example, what has happened in the country of Niger, right? So Niger is a landlocked country just above Nigeria. So there's been a coup there, and the earlier elected president has been deposed, and the military has taken over, right? This entire Western Africa, right, Saharan Africa or Western Africa, was earlier it was colonized by the French, right? So all these guys have come out of the political control of France, but economically, financially, they are still tied to France in different ways, right? For example, the currency of that entire region, and there are a lot of countries there. See, Niger is there, Chad is there, Burkina Faso, right? And so many countries there are using something called a CFA, a common French franc, as their currency, right? So indirectly, though technically you can say they're independent, but financially and economically they're under control of a developed country, right? So, for example, recently what Niger has done, they were selling uranium because it's a major, source of uranium. And you know that France has, a lot of nuclear powered, electricity in their country. In all of Europe, France has the highest percentage of electricity generated by nuclear sources.
Nuclear,
It is something
yes.
like 55-60%, right? So Niger used to sell uranium to France at I think €0.5 per kg. Now they've revised it to something like 220 euros per kg, right? That's something, in terms of trade has to be little bit more favorable to the source of the minerals, that is Africa, right? So these some of these things should get resolved, but more than that, what is of immediate urgency? See, there is something which you need development over a period of time, but there is an immediate urgency issue also. That is where food, fuel, fertilizer, the supply of these into the African region will, hopefully, entry of African Union into G20 will help them to coordinate better and will help them to get these supplies, particularly out of the Russia and Ukraine regions. So that is one. And secondly, as I said, terms of trade, which is more longer term. Third, further requirements for the transition of energy sources from the old dirty fossil fuels and carbon rich to a alternative renewable energy and other sources of energy. These are the things that you have to build on over a period of time.
Coming back to energy and how that can affect both climate change as well as economies. See, the Western nations depend a lot on fossil fuel. They're trying to change that. And biofuels
Yes.
initiative that the India has done under its presidency, that's a great initiative.
Yes.
Because if you look at electricity, and we say EV, electric vehicles, they are what you call pollution free and stuff like that, which is really not true because there are two parts to it. One is the lithium ion batteries, which when
Yes.
they're disposed of, they have their own hazards. The second
Yes.
one is, of course, how is electricity generated? It is generated from fossil fuels mostly or from hydroelectric power. It's
Yes.
very rarely generated from solar or natural sources because they cannot generate that kind of energy that is required for vehicles to be charged and stuff like that. So
Yes.
if that is the situation, uh, I don't really see how this energy crisis that is causing climate change can be resolved. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because
No, see,
electric energy is being shown as one of the ways that pollution can be reduced, but I really don't think so.
No, see, this is where, what India is talking about as biofuels. This is something, India is already walking the talk, right? So the addition of ethanol blending, which was 4 or 5%, it has gone up to around 11%, right? And they
Yes.
want to take it to 15%, right? So ethanol blending will reduce the reliance on, let us say, mining and drilling, those kind of things which are more damaging, and also at some point fossil fuels will run out. So this kind of thing, it's useful. See, but the thing is, if you look at renewable energy or alternative forms of energy, even EV, what you're saying, right? You can say, okay, once the EV electric vehicle is ready, you're just charging it out of electricity. But the environmental cost of producing that electric vehicle is very high. It's not coming free, right? So and the other point of renewable energy is, as long as the sun is shining, you will get solar energy. What do you do the rest of the day, right? As long as the wind is blowing, you will get wind energy, and that wind energy is not consistent. So if you look at, let us say, a PLF or plant load factor, if you see, for a thermal power plant, for a coal fired power plant, the PLF will be something like 90 to 95%. Right. The similar thing, if you look for, let us say, a solar energy farm, it will be 25 to 26%. Right. So if you say, I have installed 100 gigawatt capacity, that's fine. That is producing only 25 to 26 gigawatt actual electricity output. So these are the challenges with respect to renewable energy. Now, another thing what people are talking about is, let's say, pumping stations for hydropower, right? So during the daytime, when wind energy and solar energy are available, so they will generate that energy, use part of that to pump the water up into the dam. And in the night, when solar energy is not available, that water flowing down again will generate energy during that night time also, right? But these are expensive. These kind of alternative things will not happen easily. And I think one of the countries which went aggressively into solar energy and renewable energy is Germany, right? And they have struggled to manage it because all the electrical wiring and electricity transmission systems will be very unstable if you have different source of energy coming in at different points of time. So that is where the research effort has gone deeply into storing of electricity, right? Those giant batteries have come up, right, which will store electricity when the solar energy is available, and then which can, distribute that electricity later. So there are several strands of work going on. So this will take time, and the cost is there. So that is where, for example, India's effort of International Solar Alliance, these kind of things, biofuels. These efforts will have some bearing, some outcomes over a period of time.
Okay. I understand that, and one thing that I observe is that every country has its own interests, whether it's political or economic, and mostly it's economic that drives the political agenda.
Yeah.
So when they have their own interests, let's say, I'm just saying, let's say I'm an oil-rich or fossil fuel-rich country.
Yes.
If the rest of the world is developing an energy that can replace my fossil fuels, what will happen to my people is my question. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. So every
Yes.
country has its own set of issues where they are good at something, and if something else comes up that is better than that, they lose out. So they have an interest in protecting their own what they're good at, and therefore will try to deny the rest of the world something that might be better for the rest of the world itself. So this is
Yes.
a great possibility. I'm just throwing that statement out, but I think that happens in human because it's human nature to do that. If there is
Yeah.
something that's going to affect me, I will not change. I will not change it. So I think that's true in the G20 also. Everybody is, but I think better sense sometimes prevails when they talk to each other and try to understand each other's needs and concerns. And that's why I'm very impressed with this Delhi Declaration, because they have focused on global health, they're focused on biofuels, they're focused on climate change, and they're focused on the economic corridor. Now, we leave that as it is, but the economic corridor, how does it impact India? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so economic corridor, it's very important to have that as an alternative route. See what's happening, for example, if you see the Suez Canal right now, there is a decrease in the water flow into the Suez Canal, right? And because of the decreased water flow, the water right now is not deep enough to take certain large tonnage ships, right? So there has been a pile up, there has been a kind of a traffic jam in the canal, and that is struggling a little bit. So that is only one factor of why we should have alternative routes, alternative channels for commerce, for communication, for business. So the other thing, as I mentioned, the present route through the Suez Canal takes 17 days from India to Europe. And now if you have this channel working properly, it will take only 10 days. So, money saved is, time is money, and time saved is money saved, right? So that is definitely important. And as I said, this entire route between India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, Greece, this entire channel, the route it is taking, India has put in special efforts to improve the relationships among all of this in recent times. So, for example, if you see, we have built up a relationship with Greece. Recently, our people visited Cyprus, right? Right. So Greece and Cyprus are both important in that route. And there is, of course, a geopolitical tussle there coming in with Turkey. Turkey supporting Azerbaijan. And we have started supplying arms and military equipment to Armenia. Right. So, and Greece and Cyprus both are under military threat by Turkey. Right. So, we are trying to create alternative routes which will help our business and our long term well being. And the other thing, if you remember, there is an international north south transport corridor, INSTC, which went through the Chabahar port in Iran. And through Iran, we wanted a railway line which will work, which will go all the way to Moscow to Russia. And there we have done some kind of test trial transport has happened to some extent, but really that's not taken off in a big way. And also, there is a lot of political instability there, right? If you are going through Iran, you never know what's going to happen, right? And all these countries, both Russia and Iran, are under sanctions also. So that's a problem. So that is why, in long-term interest, right, you have to find new corridors, new channels, and not be happy with what we have right now. And these are the things which will help us in long-term growth, in long-term trade, long-term economic development. And all this, I can tell you, this will not happen without some kind of a blessing from US and the West, right? So, and US is of course a partner in this entire this new India Middle East Europe corridor, and the support that we are getting, that India is getting, is because US and the West wants to kind of see India as a counterweight to China, and that it's a larger geopolitical game that's been going on, and these are the things which have actually helped us. These have been in our favor in recent times, that we're able to achieve whatever we have achieved in the G20.
This Russia-Ukraine war has actually turned the economy on its head in many countries, especially the European Union, I think, because of the gas prices, and they're also started to look for alternatives. So a lot of
Yes.
these initiatives of the G20 will impact the future of the European Union and obviously the African unions, from what I can gather, because they have now alternative routes for their gases, for their gas, for their fuels, and they also got an alternative economy to move their products. And they are looking at the African markets, they're looking at the Indian market, which is huge. So Brazil market, the South American markets are huge. So they have also a lot to gain, but they also have to give a lot for us to gain. If they don't, like for instance, the India-UK the trade deal, the EU and India were having a trade deal, but I think there are some issues there also. So if these trade deals go through, then the G20 will be a more balanced version of the UN. If not,
Yes.
with the West dominating it, they will look at their interests first and others' interests second. And that's where I am afraid India and some of the developing countries, especially the African Union, might lose out. I don't know what thoughts you have on that. If we are not able to give access to our markets, and we are not able to actually give things to them.
Yeah. No, actually, I think Europe will be much more reasonable in, thanks to the Russia-Ukraine war. They have suffered greatly, right? So I think whether it is US or whether it is somebody else, somebody blew up that Nord Stream 2, right? So that entire pipeline which was supplying gas, so somebody went and blew it up, right? Now who is suffering? It's not America who is suffering. It's not UK. UK has North Sea oil, right? It is Europe and Germany in particular which is suffering. And Germany, there is a fear of deindustrialization of Germany, right? For example, BASF, that chemical giant of Germany,
Yes.
they are supposed to, open a very large new plant, and because suddenly the energy prices made it unviable, so they moved the entire plant to China. Right. So that is a problem that that Europe is between a rock and a hard place, as they say, right? Because they can't have the easy and cheap energy sources that they used to have, and they are also beholden to China because their relationship with China is so strong now, and and America is unhappy with both the issues, right? And China is they're not Europeans are not able to make up their mind whether China is their best friend or a very serious competitive rival, and they have to figure out what is what, and that is why you must have alternatives. You should not get trapped into any one place, right? And this is where hopefully Europeans will be more reasonable and be willing to have a kind of cooperative arrangement. As you rightly said, if you have a economic corridor running from India through the Middle East into Europe, they'll be able to get cheap gas from Qatar, from Saudi, from UAE, through the pipelines through the Mediterranean. It will be cheaper and better than Russian gas. So these are things they have to think through and realize that look at different countries not as less developed and more developed or anything. Look at it with a cooperative point of view and see what works best.
Yeah.
And hopefully they are in such a difficult place right now. Hopefully they will do that and they will extend a hand of cooperation to the rest of the world.
Yeah, and the thing that we have to keep in mind is that Russia and its friends, like for instance, Russia and China, currently they are friends. You do not know in future, but right now they are the best friends. So because they have a strategic interest together, so they are also part of the G20 or the G21 as it is now, and they have also something to benefit from this. Otherwise, they would have definitely dissented. Uh, what their interests are in that at the moment is not very clear because on the face of it, they lose out. Actually speaking, they lose out. But what their interest is may be strategic. We do not know, and hopefully at some point in future we'll come to know what it is. Uh, so, you have any
No, I
thoughts on
think
that? Russia and
Russia.
China?
Yeah. See, I think Russia is quite happy with the outcome of the G20 because both the Russian president and the Chinese president they didn't attend the Delhi summit. But it is understandable because Russia president going anywhere out, I think he didn't attend the big summit also in Johannesburg.
Yes,
So
yes, yes,
he was not
yes, yes.
expected. Yeah. But I think they were very happy with the joint communique, the statement that came out because it did not mention Russia by name as the aggressor.
Mm,
Right, and that
mm.
was a tough point that our guys have been able to negotiate. So Russia is happy with the outcome, no problem. China, I think they don't have anything which is directly going to benefit them, but I think they did not want to go against whatever proceedings are happening in the G20 because that will have a blowback on them. So I don't think they have any great benefit to come out of it. But if there is some kind of a global understanding about energy transition, tackling climate change, and so on, they will also benefit in the long run. See, because where climate change and other such issues are concerned, China always tries to project itself as a developing country. See, that is ridiculous. If China has a GDP of now $19.5 trillion, right? Per capita is more than $10,000. If you compare to India, our GDP is $3.5 billion. And we have now a larger population than China. Our per capita is just $2,700, right? So if we say we are a developing country, it makes sense. It no longer, but under the guise of developing country, it has derived benefits so far. So I don't know whether they think they can still have some benefits out of it. But see, there is no doubt that China is the second largest economy in the world. It is a rising military power. It is getting ready to challenge America in the Pacific, right? And technological edge is also very evident. So it is going to be a difficult country to handle for everybody, for
That
everybody.
is true. That is true.
So China, if you
Absolutely.
see, it has 22 frontiers with 18 countries, and it has a border dispute with each and every neighbor, each and every neighbor. So if it has a fight with one or two neighbors, you can say, okay, the fault could be this side or that side. But if it has a fight with 18 neighbors, you know where the problem is. So these are the things that we'll have to face it. There is no easy solution. As we have seen in India, that Ladakh face off has been going on for 3.5 years, right? And China doesn't want to bring it to a satisfactory conclusion. So this problem will be there. It's going to be a very difficult phase in the next few years and decades for the rest of the world to come to some kind of an understanding with China.
Yeah, the thing is with China is nobody understands their motives. That is probably one of the most difficult things to resolve because their motives are not very clear. Whether it is just land acquisition or whether there's an economic intent or if there's something else beyond both of them, it's not very clear. So maybe tackling them is a little difficult at this point of time. But when the nations get together and they are a little isolated, like they're trying to do perhaps now, then things will be a little more clear. But I think
No,
this has been
I
a
think. Mm,
yeah,
no, sorry.
yeah.
I was
You were
just
saying
saying. I
something.
think. Yeah, I think since Xi Jinping has taken over, and the way that he's showing this aggression, and I think what China wants to do is just be the next superpower in the planet, right? And China is happy to be part of G2, where America and China are the two biggest powers. So it is not really a leader of the South, or it doesn't want to kind of champion the cause of the South. It's not like India, right? India is trying to do something not just for itself, it's trying to be a spokesperson for the entire South. right? China is very clearly, it wants to be the new emperor. That's it. So new empire. So I don't think that is something that can work. So, but it's that is a challenge.
Yeah. I think it's been a very interesting conversation, Mr. Ramana, on the G20. We have covered a lot of topics. We have covered the achievements, and we have delved deep into why they are considered achievements, given the background of the G20 and the history of the G20. So I thank you for that, and maybe we can get together for another conversation soon on various other topics related to geopolitics and money, because without money there is no politics, and as I said, without politics there is no money. So let's get together again from on behalf of News Karnataka and from the studios in Mangalore. I thank you very much for joining us on this special conversation on the G20 summit. Thank you.
Yeah. So my pleasure, Brian. Your pleasure talking with you. Thank you.